and it has the right conditions for life to exist. As NPR's Joe Palca reports, the astronomers are calling this the first Goldilocks planet.
Just to review, Goldilocks was the little girl who didn't like porridge that was too hot or too cold. That's what a planet around another star would have to be like in order to harbor life.
The planet has to be at the right distance from the star so that it's not too hot, not too cold, liquid water can exist. And then the planet has to have roughly the proper surface gravity.
That's Paul Butler of the Carnegie Institution of Washington. He spoke this afternoon at a news conference organized by Butler's funder, the National Science Foundation. Astronomers have found hundreds of planets orbiting other stars in the past decade, but they've all been so far from their suns that any water would be solid ice, or so close that liquid water would boil away. The new planet, called Gliese 581g, is different. Now, Butler has no direct evidence that Gliese 581g has water.
What we know is that this planet exists at the right distance for liquid water, and that it has the right amount of mass to hold on to an atmosphere and to protect its liquid water on the surface. And of course, any subsequent discussion about life is purely speculative.
But then he couldn't resist speculating.
That being said, on the Earth, anywhere you find liquid water, you find life in abundance.
There are 6 planets around Gliese 581. Even if 581g doesn't have life, Stephen Vogt of the University of California, Santa Cruz says the solar system around Gliese 581 has an eerie resemblance to the one around our sun.
It has an inner clutch of rocky, sort of terrestrial-like planets.
Like Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars.
And then this sort of loner that's sitting on the outside, which is kind of like our Jupiter. But it's scaled down. This entire solar system would fit within our own Earth's orbit.
That's because Gliese 581 is a red dwarf, a pipsqueak of a star compared to our sun.
If you think of the sun as a 100-watt light bulb, this star is a 1-watt light bulb. It's like a Christmas tree light.
David Charbonneau is another planet hunter at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics.
So, to have the same temperature, a planet needs to be much closer to that star than it would be from the sun to have a temperature where you might have life and water.
Charbonneau says the next step will be to try to analyze the atmosphere of this planet and other Goldilocks planets that are probably out there to see if they contain oxygen, another key chemical for life. Those findings are probably some years off, but Charbonneau predicts they will come. Joe Palca, NPR News, Washington.
We're funded by you, our listeners, and by Hirsch Roberts Weinstein, a law firm helping businesses and institutions meet their labor, employment, and litigation needs. Experience and commitment, hrwlawyers.com. Plymouth Rock Assurance with a mobile website with on-the-go account access and bill payment at plymouthrock.com. More than just insurance, Plymouth Rock Assurance. And the Wall Street Journal Weekend, offering 4 sections of ideas and information available at newsstands every Saturday.
This is WBUR, Boston's NPR news station. Coming up in about 15 minutes, for the first time ever, more Americans between the ages of 25 and 34 are single than married. Is marriage on the rocks? Find out more later this hour here on WBUR. Wall Street business news today. Stock prices finished lower in lackluster trading. The Dow closed with a loss of nearly 23 points at 10,835. The Nasdaq is down 3. The S&P 500 fell almost 3. More business news on Marketplace at 6:30. It's 80 degrees in Boston right now. Tonight's lows in the 60s. Tomorrow, rain in the forecast. Highs in the 70s.
WBUR supporters include the Institute for Public History at Gordon College, announcing the inaugural season of their Old Town Hall Lecture Series in Salem, Mass. More at oldtownhalllectures.com. And the Lexus HS Hybrid, reducing petroleum use with an EPA-rated combined 35 mpg. Actual mileage will vary. More online at lexus.com/HS. This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Melissa Block.
And I'm Robert Siegel. We can evidently thank the Ottoman Empire for the institution of the military band. The Turks started marching to music in the 16th century, and it seems the idea has daunting staying power. Walter Pincus of the Washington Post has encountered that staying power. He wrote a series of columns criticizing the cost of about military music, and he's heard quite a bit of criticism from his readers. The U.S. spends hundreds of millions of dollars each year on dozens of military marching bands, rock groups, jazz ensembles, choruses, and country bluegrass performance teams like this one, the Navy's Country Current. Walter Pincus joins us now from his home in Washington. Welcome to the program once again.
Nice to be here.
And you write that you were prompted to look into the world of military musicianship by a new field manual for military bands. How did that happen?
Well, there are two things involved. One is there was a new Army field manual, but also Secretary Gates, Defense Secretary Gates, has made a point in talking about sort of the way the government looks at priorities. He has more military musicians than the State Department has Foreign Service officers. So that metaphor intrigued me, and I decided to see just how many there were.
Well, how much money do you figure the U.S. spends on military musicians?
Well, one of the oddities is nobody can tell me for sure. The only service that came up with the number was the Marines, and the Marines came back and told me that they spend $50 million on their bands. The Army couldn't give me a good figure. They finally estimated about $190 million, but they pride themselves on being the biggest employer of musicians in the country, between 4,000 and 5,000 of them. And the Navy and the Air Force have a series of bands all over the place.
Now, the stated purpose of Army bands and those of the other branches, you say, is to provide music throughout the entire spectrum of operations to instill in our forces the will to fight and win, foster the